So today we will start the next chapter, which is data model chapter. So as I was telling that from this chapter we will have the system interaction, and this is the chapter where the exact implementation start for MDG framework. So now first of all, what is data model? So data model is uh, a kind of a place in the framework, in MDG framework, where we define the whole structure of the framework, like whatever the entities will be there, whatever the entity types will be there, what will be the relationships between those entity types, and defining the access class, and many more other details which we define in the data model. So first of all, there are certain things which needs to be understand from the data model standpoint. That is, data model contain the entity types. Now, what is entity types? So basically, if I say in a very simple term, the entity types is nothing but a group of entities. So let's say I can say entity types A, which may contain 10 entities or attributes, okay, which is relevant to that particular entity type. So let's say for an example, material purchase. So material purchase, if it is a entity type, then whatever the attribute I will have inside that entity types, that will be all related to the material purchase. Okay. So now the next question is, how many entity types I can have? There can be n number of entity types in the data model. So it is all uh, depends on your business framework, but there are certain standard entity types which provided by SAP. Of course, we can extend the custom entity type as much as we want according to our requirement. Then we have the relationships. So relationships always happens related to the entity types. So if I have, let's say, uh, 10 entity types in the data model, I need to define the relations between those entity types. It is very important to define the relationships between those entity types. I cannot say that no, let's say I have a entity type, but I don't want to define in relationship with that entity type with the other entity types. No, that is not possible. So you have to do it. The why this relation is important? Because every entity types are defining some area. Let's say for an example, as I mentioned, let's say material purchase or material sales, okay, which is nothing but a part of material data. So if I create a relation, a proper relation, then what I need to do, there will be a material basic data entity type. So the basic data entity type will have a relation with material sales and material plant or purchase, whatever. So that will be a proper relations with the different entity types. And then we'll have a attributes. So entity types will have a different attributes. So remember, the relations will always with the entity types, not with the attributes, because attributes will be part of entity types. And then finally you have the attributes will have the appropriate data element. What we see in the table level, we have field, then we have data element, then we have the domain, and so and so. So this is how a quick data model entity relationship structures. Now let's move on. So type of data model. So we have basically the three different types. One is custom data model, another one is the standard data model, and the third type is the enhancement of standard data model. So custom data model means the data model which we defined uh, completely out of blue, which is not provided by SAP. It is a completely based on the requirement we are creating from our end. So that is the custom data model, where definitely there can be some standard attribute or custom attribute. That is a different story. But the concept of the data model is completely a custom concept. Standard data model means which is provided by SAP, like data model, finance data model, BP data model, which is having business partner along with customer and vendor. And then we have the enhancement of standard data model. So most of the project, what you need to do, that is all enhancement of the standard data model. Okay, so you have, let's say, data model. You, based on your project requirement, you need to extend them with some custom entities, with some custom entity types. You have to create some relationships and so and so. So this is something, the different types of data model. So in our discussion, we will create all different data model and we'll see how it look like or what are the inside details it has. So let's start with the custom data model, and first we will start with one simple framework, which is airline data management framework, where we will have the carrier ID, the currency, the airline URL and name of airline, okay, or description you can say. So these four different type of details we will take, and based on that we will create the airline data management framework for MDG data model. So by that time I hope you already have the access of the system. Choose stuck. So now, so this is the MDG system, and in this system I'm first going to the transaction MDG IMG. So MDG IMG is the transaction which we will be using uh, uh, very frequently, because this is the transaction for the entire MDG framework. Okay, so whether it is a data model, UI, all sort of things. So you can see that this is the master data governance transaction, and under this transaction we have general settings. So these are all general settings, and under the general settings we have something called data model, UI, search and duplicate check, process model, data replication, value mapping, key mapping, data transfer, all these activity which are the pillars of MDG framework, and then followed by some configurations like finance related configuration, business partner, supplier, customer, then business consolidation, material, etc. So let's start with the data model and edit data model. Okay. Now let's, however, I just created a few minutes back, but I will create a fresh data model for the airline process. Okay. So let's create an, so just give a name YB, because it's a custom one. So I'm starting with Z or Y. Okay. So any kind of a custom item which we will create in SAP, it should be start with Z or Y. So description, which is airline data management framework. Okay. Now active area. For the time being, I'm just parking this active area concept, but this is one of the very important concept as far as MDG is concerned. So I'm just parking this item, will come shortly. So then rest of the details will come automatically. So let's save it. Continue. Now, just few minutes back, I have created this request. So basically two types of request we have. We have workbench request and another one is the customizing request. What is customizing request? Customizing request means, let's say you are creating one custom program, custom executable ABAP program. So that is something which you are creating completely a new object and custom object. So that will be part of the custom request. But workbench request is something where you have already the standard items present. You are probably extending those standard items. So already the data model, the list of data model is already present. I'm just extending this list with my own attributes. Okay. So that's what it is coming as a workbench request. This is the number and this is the description. So I'm just saving this detail under that. Go back. Now here you can see. So this is the data model name, date, time, and the active version. Of course, you can see description. You can see the username. So this is the username of the system. So you can see, so SAP user is the username. Okay. So last modified date and time. And then the active version. Now here let's start with the active version. So what is active version? Active version is, by seeing the active version, you can say whether the data model is what kind of data model, or rather I can say in which state this data model is at this moment standing. So when I say that the active version is same, it means the data model is activated successfully. That means the if it is successfully activated, the active version will come as same. Next is different. Different means, let's say for an example, data model, which is right now same. I am going to this data model. This is the entity type. Under this entity type, let's say I'm creating one attribute and just save it. So I just add save. Now you can see the active version is different. So that means what I did, I just went to this data model. I add something, some attribute, and just save it. I did not activate it. So that means once upon a time my data model was active. Then I went there, I make some changes, and once I made some changes, I just saved it but did not activate. So if that is the case, then the active version will show as different. Okay.
Aditya, your
So that
screen
means
seems to be
if,
frozen. Aditya, sorry.
is this the case?
Yeah, I still see the attributes screen. I don't know if it is a case for others.
Uh, I can see, let's say for an example, I'm going to some new
Okay,
screen.
now it started working. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
you're in easy access menu, right?
Right. So now I again come back to MDG framework screen, and now I am in data model and just in the data model list now. Okay.
Okay,
So
thank you.
here, yeah. So active version different. So if I see active version different, I can straight away say that this data model is not in active state. So we have to make it active, because until and unless my data model is active, I cannot do any further activity, whether it is UI or whether it is process model activity or whether it is search and duplicate check, replication, anything. The first requirement is my data model has to be activated, because ultimately data model is the warehouse, data warehouse, and all kind of attribute which I am dealing in the MDG framework, the source is the data model. So the data model has to be always the active version same. Now coming to the third category, which is the active version none. None means, that means this data model just created, just created, but not, but just saved and not activated yet. So this type of data model, so if I see active version none, I can say this data model has been created, but it is not activated yet. It just saved it. So such kind of case, I can see the active version is showing as none. Okay. Now when I go to the entity types in this data model, I can see everything is blank, because I just defined the name of the data model and the description. Now slowly I am going to feed the rest of the details. So what are those details I need to feed? So for the first thing which I need to do, that is the carrier ID, currency, airline URL, and description of the airline. So the first is carrier ID. Okay. So this is the entity type name I'm giving. Obviously, you can give some Z, Y carrier ID or whatever you want. Now the next thing, which is a part of entity type details, that is the storage and use type. What is the storage type? So if I now go back to the uh, this PPT, I can see there are different type of storage type which has been listed here. So what are the different type of storage type? In short, we just call them as a type 1, type 2, type 3 and type 4. Okay. In a very native way, or rather regular basis, we can say, okay, this entity type is like a type 1, or this entity type is like type 2 or type 3 or type 4. But there is a concept behind it, why we call them type 1, 2, 3 and 4. So the first thing is, when I'm saying that a certain entity type is type 1 entity, that means that entity type is the leading entity type. What is the meaning of leading entity type? That means without that entity type, the MDG framework cannot be built. Okay, so for an example, if I just go back for a minute and material, okay, so material entity type. Now I can see there is a plenty number of entity types we have under data model. Now material, which is nothing but one of the leading entity type. So here you can see the storage type is the type 1, which is nothing but changeable via change request generated database table. Okay. So if I go by the description says that under this entity type, whatever the attribute you have, those attributes will be part of the change request. So what is change request? In the last session we were talking about, like in MDG, everything we are doing, like whether we are creating some master data or updating some master data or doing block and block, mark for deletion, mass processing, whatever we are doing, that we are doing through the MDG change request. So under this entity type, whatever the attribute we have, that will be part of change request, and those attribute can be updated at any point of time, and obviously after the proper activation, those details will be saved in the respective database table. If it is material, then it will be like Mara table or different type of material related table, MARC table, MVKE table, etc. Okay. Similarly, if I talk about business partner in the same way, so this BP data model, and again it is also having a plenty number of entity types. Now here, if I say a BP header, so BP header, which is having the business partner ID, the business partner group details, account group details for BP. So that is also defined as a type 1. Okay. So without this BP ID, it is not possible to create this business partner model. So whether you are creating customer or vendor, you must have the business partner. You must have the business partner ID and its account group. Similarly, the material entity which I was just talking before this, so that under the material entity type, you have all the material basic information, like what is the material type, what is industry sector, what is unit of measure. So obviously without this, you cannot create any material details. So in short, I can say that without this type of entity types, it's not possible to create the respective master data. So that's what we call them as a type 1 entity type or leading entity type. Okay. And if I go by the description, it also stands with like the particular attribute part of this entity types will be also part of the change request, and after processing, after activating, it will be part of the respective database table. Similarly, if I talk about the business partner, then after processing, it will be available the BP related table like BU T000, or let's say if I deal with the vendor, then the vendor table like LFA1, LFM1 for vendor purchase. Similarly for customer, KNA1 for customer master data. So these are all different database tables. Okay. Now coming to the type 4 directly. Why? There is a reason. So type 1 we just understood. Type 4. If I go by the description type 4, it says changeable via, okay, before I go to the type 4, let's complete type 1. because here the carrier ID which I am trying to create, it will be part of type 1, because without carrier ID I cannot create the airline management framework. So this is a kind of a leading entity type for me. So this is the storage type. Now validity is nothing but whether it is edition dependent or non-edition. Okay, so like every MDG version having some editions. So if I say that it is edition dependent, so in this particular edition only it will be available. When you migrate to the next edition, this data will not be available. So that's what we will always do with the edition dependent. Sorry, edition independent. I'm sorry. So data element. So the carrier ID data element is, so if I go to the S flight table, which is having the carrier ID details, okay. So from there I can get the data element for this carrier ID. Okay. Similarly, if there is any hierarchy details, okay. Hierarchy is another topic. I'm not going into that at this moment. So basically we define the hierarchies for the material, okay, based on country, based on different, let's say ingredients, etc. Anyway, so this does not have any hierarchy. And then hierarchy, whether hierarchy also will have any edition dependent. So no, this is not an edition dependent. Then key assignment, key cannot be changed, key, no internal key assignment. So whatever the standard primary keys has been defined, so that will be defined as it is. That cannot be changed. Now length. So I'm just giving some length here. If I want to make some attachment, I can do that, but honestly speaking, it's hardly we use it. Search help, if I have any search help related to this entity type, that we can do here. So let's go with the very simple one, because this is our first example. Deletion, yes, deletion allowed. Any point of time we can delete this entity type. And the description. So this is airline carrier ID. Okay. Any associated table structure field, yes, sometimes it required, but in this example we will go with a very simple one. Down the line, in the various examples, definitely you can see we are adding the respective structures, respective fields, etc., etc. Anyway. So that is registered in this TR, the changes. So this is the carrier ID entity type. Now, along with this entity type, I want to add some attribute. So attribute, let's say, if I go back one step. So carrier ID is now created. Let's say airline URL. So airline URL is purely depends on the carrier ID. So I will just say URL. So whether it is a mandatory field, if it is a mandatory field, or means whether it is a kind of primary key field. So if it is a primary key field, then I can tick this or not required. If it is it a required entry, mandatory obligatory entry, so that we can do that. Or the data element. So this is the data element for URL. Now, whether this field is associated with the currency or unit of measure field, no. Whether it has any search help, if it is having any search help details, we can associate that. Existence change, no existence check means it is a kind of sort of a validation. Anyway, we will not do anything here. we will definitely have a validation. In fact, down the line, you can see we will have our custom validations in the MDG framework. So that's fine. So description. So here we can give some description, airline, URL, then any associate table, structure, field. Yes, down the line we will see, but not in this example. Okay. Fine. So that means we have created one entity type which is carrier ID, and inside this carrier ID we have an attribute which is URL. Okay. So carrier ID and URL is done. Now coming to the currency. So currency will be another entity type here. So currency will be another entity type. Now, before I jump to the currency, I will quickly back to the storage type again. So now we talked about the storage type 1. Let's move on to the storage type 4. What is the type 4 storage type? If I go by the description says changeable via other entity type and generated database table. Okay. Now, if I give a quick example, let's say material and classification, class and characteristics. Okay. Now let's say the material is the crude oil and the class is, let's say, petrol, diesel, kerosene. It can be anything in the classification. Now the characteristics. In the characteristics, so the first is color of the item and the density of the item, the price, like that. So the color is, let's say, black. Just kidding. Density is something, some details, and price is 100 rupees. Okay, so this is the characteristics, this is the classification, and this is the actual material. Now this is the 3 major item. Now if I say material is nothing but the type 1, and obviously if I just say that the classification and characteristics for what? Classification and characteristics for this material. Now, for instance, if I say my material is biscuit, whether it will have the same classification what we had for the crude oil? Of course not. The classification will change, right? So let's say the classification is this one. Okay, and it will have the characteristics. Whether this will be the same characteristics? Of course not. There will be like what is the wheat contained. Okay, then price. Okay, so that means the moment my material change, my classification and the characteristics change. So if I say the classification and characteristics purely depends on the material, whether it is true statement, of course it is true, because whenever my material change, the classification and characteristics gets changed. So I can say then classification and characteristics, they are nothing but the type 4. So they are the type 4 storage type, and we call this classification and characteristics as a type 4 storage type. So now if I go by the description, that is changeable via other entity type and generated database table. That makes sense. So classification and characteristics changeable via other entity type, which is material as a type 1, and post, if I want to change or create or update anything, then post activation this data also will go to the respective database table, right? So, and always remember, type 4 always point to type 1. Okay, type 4 means, at least the majority cases I can tell you, type 4 majority cases it points to type 1. But however, there are some instances where type 4 point to type 3 as well. Okay, so it all depends on the requirement. But just remember that type 4 will be a such kind of entity types which will depends on the other entity types. It could be type 1 or it could be type 3, etc. Okay. So now, what is the next one? The next one is the type 3. Type 3. If I go by the description, type 3, we will get confused. That the description says not changeable via MDG, no generated table. Okay. So we will not go by the description this particular type 3. Rather we will say type 3 is nothing but a such kind of entity types which depends on the domain values, that is nothing but the type 3. Now example is nothing but the currency. So if I go by the currency, let's say in S-flight table I have currency. Currency is the field and this is the data element. So if I go to this data element and go to the domain, then value range, then you can see there is a value table. Go to the value table which is having the currency key and the description. Execute, and you can see there are 10 entries. These are all entries, which is nothing but the currency key. Okay, so I can create my own currency. So now it is a part of this. So that means what? That means this entity type values coming from this coming from this domain table, this domain value table. It is not something which we as a user is defining from our end. It is coming from this list. Yes, this list will be defined by someone like some user, but it is not a free text field. It is coming from the respective domain value table. Okay, so that is nothing but the type 3. So if I now complete the currency detail, so this is the data element which we will define in the data model respect to the currency. Okay, first we will select this type 3, and then data element. Length is not necessary to define because already it is coming from the domain table, and there already it is having the valued length defined. Okay. Fine. So this is the two entity types, carrier ID and currency. Now the question is whether under currency we need to add any attribute. No, it's not necessary. Why? Because if you see, this currency is just not an entity type. It is also representing itself as an attribute because it is having certain value which it carries, and also it is an entity type. So one lesson from here, whether all entity types will have some attribute, not necessary. So that is the reason I created this example. So you can see in the carrier ID, we have the attribute like URL. And obviously we can have n number of attributes. That's not a problem. But at the same time, another entity type which does not have any attribute, and we will not make them because this entity type we want to treat as an attribute also as entity type. Okay, so that's the reason we create this data. Now coming back to the storage type. So we talked about type 1, we talked about type 3, we talked about type 4. Now what about type 2? Now first of all, type 2 is very rare type of entity type which used rarely in any kind of project. If I talk about myself, I never use type 2 in whatever the project we have used. And why? The reason is, if you go by the description, it says this type of entity type changeable without change request. Now so far there is all the time we discussed that anything and everything we will do in MDG, that is through the change request. Whether we are creating something, we are changing something, we are doing mark for deletion, block unblock, mask processing, whatever we will do through the MDG change request. But this is the first statement so far. It has been saying that changeable without MDG change request and generated check table or text table. Okay, so that means this particular entity type values, whatever the attribute it is having, those attribute values does not depends on your change request. So whatever the data you have in your change request does not mean it will go by that data. Now for an example, exchange rate. So let's say today you create some material with certain exchange rate and you ship this material, and the day it shipped and the day it reached the destination, whether it will have the same exchange rate. And I'm saying that the ship day and the reach day for that particular material is a different day, not in the same day. So whether it will be a same exchange rate, not at all. It will be a different exchange rate because exchange rate varies daily basis. Okay, so in that case, whatever the day when the material delivers to the customer, that exchange rate will be registered. So doesn't matter in your change request whatever the exchange rate has been registered, but ultimately in your system it will be updated the day the material has been handover or delivered to the customer. So such kind of example we can say it will comes under the type 2. Okay, now whether there is no customer which use type 2, no, there are some customers, there are some requirements where we need type 2, and that is why the type 2 has been given. Otherwise there is no point to give type 2. But in MDG project most of the cases you can see the use of type 2 is very rare. Okay. So now let's move on. So we have created these two entity types. Now coming to the next segment, which is relationship. As we were saying that whenever we will create the entity types, we must have some relationships, and the relationships will always go with the entity types, not with the attribute, because attribute will be part of entity type. So whenever you have a relation with entity types, automatically the attribute will be indirectly part of it. So here the relationship, if we define, so let's say in the relationship what we want in the requirement we have carrier ID, currency, URL, and description is also defined along with the carrier ID. So now let's say I have this 4 information in this data model. Now if I define the relations, how I will define the relations? Let's say for an example, if I say based on the carrier ID I want to see the currency, whether it is relevant. Yes, it is relevant, but not very much relevant, because there can be n number of carrier ID and it is not possible to remember the carrier ID details. So better we will do a kind of a relation that is based on the currency we will see the carrier ID. So whenever we even in a real-time scenario, let's say I want to travel from Bangalore to Mumbai. So first what I want to see for next, let's say next Sunday, what are those carrier IDs are available from Bangalore to Mumbai within some currency range, let's say within 5,000, okay, or within 4,000. So based on that currency range, I can see the list of carrier ID, which normally we do in our regular, searching process. So that makes sense. So based on the currency, we can identify the carrier ID. Okay. So that way we will also define the relationship here. So from entity is currency, to entity is carrier ID. We can define relationship name. Okay, it can be anything. So yeah, carrier ID underscore currency, some name I can give. Then the next is the relationship type. Now again, there are basically 4 different type of relationship we have. Okay. So now coming to the relationship types. So there are 4 different type of relationship. Today, the example which I am dealing with, I will only go with the first type of relationship, that is a referencing relation. I will come to the rest of the relationship type with a different demonstration. So today I want to restrict myself with the first type of relationship, which is referencing relationship. Now what is referencing relationship? Referencing, this term we use in so many places, particularly if I talk about any industry point of view, we say refer your buddy, right? Refer your buddy. So if you have any friend, you can refer them. So that means if your friend is joining to some X company, so your relation with your friend will be a referencing relationship. Okay, so that means you are directly pointing to your friend. It's a kind of an array pointer. Okay, so Similarly, if I say one pen having the value of 10 rupees, so the pen which is item having the value which is 10 rupees, they are basically in a relationship which is referencing relations. They directly refer to each other. Similarly, you refer to your body. So that is a referencing relations. So in this example, it is similar to that. So the currency which I am searching with, that is having the respective carrier ID, right? So that is nothing but the referencing relations. Now the cardinality. So the cardinality is, let's say 1:1. 1:1 means, let's say I am searching the currency 3000 or 4000, and based on this search I get only one carrier ID. That means the cardinality is 1:1. When I am saying 1:n, that means when I am giving the currency 4000, based on that I can get more than one entry of carrier ID. That means it is 1:n relations. And 0:n is, I didn't have this currency at all, but based on that I have some carrier ID, which is not in this case at all. So in this case, either it can be 1:n or 1:1. We will go with 1:n, which is more relevant. Then data element. Data element, we will go with the currency data element here, because my from entity type is nothing but the currency here. Again, some existence check anyway, that is fine. We will have our own validations or anything. So description, relation between currency and carrier ID. Okay. So we talked about entity type, we talked about attribute, and we talked about relationship. However, we also need to talk about the relationship like leading relations, qualifying, foreign key, that will come into the different demonstration. So with this, if I quickly go back, so this is our data model. Still I can see active version none, because I just made the entry but saved it, not activated yet. So now I'm going to activate it. So now it depends how much data you have in the data model. Based on that, the activation will take that much of time. So here I have a very limited data. So you can see the data model is now active, and you can see the active version is same, which means the data model is activated now. Now the moment the data model gets activated, the first thing which we need to do, that is it is a kind of a sequential activity. Immediately you have to do that. That is, you have to call the another transaction, which is SE38, which define executable ABAP program editor. There you need to type the program name USMD underscore adjust staging, which means to update the master data changes after activation of the data model. So what happens, the concept is, in the data model you have added your data, you have activated that. But the moment you activate, what happens, in the back end, the staging area create. Now the staging area is not just MDG concept. Even you go to MDM, Not only SAP MDM, even Oracle MDM, IBM MDM, Informatica MDM, any kind of MDM. In fact, in CRM also the staging area concepts are there. So staging area is nothing but the backend structure. Okay. So whenever you create some data, you create some framework, you and activate them. So in the backend, you will have a similar kind of a framework which will be available after the activation. So all we are doing to make synchronization of foreground data model and the backend staging table. Okay, with this program. So the program name is USMD adjust staging, and execute it. Provide the data model. Sorry, my data model name is YB. So it's YB and execute. So now it will start synchronizing the data model and the backend staging table. Okay, and that's done. Now again go back to this SE38, and there you type another program, USMD data model, where you can see the list of generated tables. Internet issue in between, so I got disconnected. I hope you can hear me now, right? You can hear me now, right?
Now we can hear you, Aditya.
Okay, okay. Okay, so let me repeat what I was talking about. So post the synchronization, we can come with another program, that is USMD data model. The purpose of this program is that post synchronization, we want to see that whether all the backend staging table has been created successfully and what is the details of the staging table respect to the entity types. That's the whole idea to see this execution of this program. So this is the program name, execute, and the data model name, and click here and you can see. So the first one you can see, that is the carrier ID entity type, which is the check table. So check table and text table. Remember, text table contains the description. Check table contains the value. So this is the, what you see, the physical name. This is nothing but the staging table. Now you can see the name, what you see here, the physical table name. It does not mean that when you work in your project system and you create a similar kind of example and you will have the same physical table name. No, it depends. It changes system to system. But system instance to instance, the name change. So it's a dynamic. It's not a static table. So that's what we call this table also as a runtime table. So it feeds the data in a runtime manner. Okay. So if I go to this particular table, what we can see few important fields like carrier ID, URL, currency, and along with that, we also see one field called USMD active, which defines whether the the data model is active or not. Then we have uh, some fields which is like USMD create entity, when this data model created, who has been created this data model, when the data model has been changed for the last time, and who has been changed this data model. So those important details. And now if I execute this, so here the carrier ID. Now if I see, I have 0 example because I just now created the data model. I haven't start creating the data. It will take some time because we have to first create the data model, then we have to create the process model, then we have to create the UI, and then only I can start creating the data, not before that. Okay, so that is the physical table, or we call it as a staging table as well. So that means you can see whatever the data or whatever the details I have added in the data model, all the details are available here in this particular staging table. Okay, so now you can understand how the data got synchronized with that. So now, yes, so with this is one small example of how to deal with the custom data model. Okay, so any question so far? Whatever the custom data model we have created and whatever the details we talked about so far, any question related to that?
Aditya, like, why did you associate a data element for a relationship?
Okay, so as I mentioned, in the data model, if I say that in this data model, what kind of data I have? If I ask in a very functional question, in a very general question, then what I will say on top of the things? On top of the things, I will say, in this data model, I have basically 2 types of data. Basically, one is the carrier ID details, which will have carrier ID, some URL, or it can have some more entry, obviously. And the second type of data is the currency detail. So this is the 2 type of data which we have. Similarly, if I go for some standard data model like which is material master. So if I say in the material master, what kind of data you have? So from top of the things, I can say it can have basic data, it can have sales data, it can have plant information, it can have MRP details, it can have classification, it can have characteristics, so many other things. Okay, so when I'm saying this, that it can have this, from where I'm getting this information? Basically from the entity types. So we have specific entity type which defines certain details, whether it is a plant data, whether it is a sales data, whether it is a characteristic, classification, currency. So we have separate entry for that as an entity type. Yes, entity type may have thousands of attributes inside, but ultimately this is a kind of a data I have which I get a sense from the entity type. So that's what in the relationship we define those entity types, because in this example, if you look at this, this is one thread, right? This is one thread. So material followed by material classification, followed by material characteristics. So this is one thread. So they are the different records and they come together into a single thread, right? So those thread, how we create it? Through the relations, through relations between type 1 and type 4. So that's what in relationship we will always go with entity types rather than any attribute. Okay.
And Aditya, like the staging table, it's always two tables, one check table and a text table per data model.
For the no, for let me go there. Let me go to USMD underscore adjust staging execute YG, the data model name here. So it is all depends on what are those, sorry, the data model. Okay. It is all depends that what are those entries I have. Now the point you make that whether I will have always the two entries like check table and text table for any kind of data model. No, no, no. It's not like that. In this particular data model, I have the major entity type, which is a leading entity type, which is carrier ID. Okay. So based on this carrier ID, I have one check table and one text table. Similarly, if I go with, let's say, MM, in MM data model, I may have plenty of entity types which are defined as a type 1 along with, let's say, material. Okay. So here you can see material for an example. So respect to material, I have one check table and one text table. Now, material also having some associated entity types, like material is also having in relation with those entity type, whether it is with type 1, type 3, or whether it is type 1, type 4, or anything. In that case, we have the different entries altogether and they are completely a different entity types. They having completely a different set of information. Okay, so that's what it contained, a different staging table format. Okay, so the statement is has to be like any kind of data model will have the physical table or the staging table based on the different entity types, mainly based on the different leading entity types. And obviously, it will almost every leading entity type will have their check table and text table, followed by some relations staging tables. Okay. So that should be the right way to define it. Okay. Any other question? So cardinality also we talked about. Now coming to the next point. So this is one small example with the custom data models. Now coming to the next type of data model, which is a standard data model. So standard data model is a data model which is defined by SAP. Now what are those data model SAP defined? Let's start with business partner. Okay. Now business partner, before I talk about the business partner data model, I must talk about a little details about the business partners, how the business partner defines as far as MDG is concerned. Now, business partner, we define as BP. Okay. Now here the business partner is uh, the mother entry, I can say. Okay, it is top in the hierarchy. Now business partner will have vendor master, and also it may have customer master. Okay, so business partner will be the top level hierarchy, and under this we have vendor master and customer master. Now if I talk about normal ECC system, not MDG system, normal ECC system, like let's say ABAP system. Okay, in normal ECC system, when you create vendor master, it is not necessary to have the business partner linked with, but in MDG it is required. In MDG, whenever you are creating the vendor master data, your vendor master should have a link with business partner. So basically, let's say I'm creating the vendor master data. So I'm creating the vendor master data. So what are those details I need to fill in the MDG change request? First is the BP details. In BP details, majorly what are those details you need to fill? Basically the BP general data, where you will have the BP ID, BP account group, description, etc. Then next is address details. Okay, your the pin code number, the country, the transportation zone, the address, house number, etc. Next is the bank details, the account details, then the tax details. Okay, so in bank details you have basically the account details, the SWIFT number. Okay, so these are all bank ID, the tax details. Then you have the role details. Role details means whether it is related to, because always in vendor master basically you have company code and you have purchase org, where in customer master you have company code and the sales org. Okay, so in role details you have to define whether you need only the company code or along with the company code the purchase org as well. Okay, so those details you need to define. So these are all mainly the BP details. Then followed by ERP vendor. So ERP vendor details. Okay, in ERP vendor details, basically you need to provide the company code details, company code, general data, payment method, payment terms, all those details. Okay, and then followed by the purchase details. Okay, so this is the way you have to define. So after processing these details, what you have the BP number. Let's say BP number is 601010, something like that. I'm just giving one simple example. And vendor number is, let's say, 101010, something like that. Okay, so that means you have BP number and the associated vendor number, right? So this is how in MDG we define the vendor master. You always have the respective BP number and the vendor number. Similarly, if I deal with Same way, the customer master, so customer master data, then you have the BP details, BP general data, address details, bank details, tax details, role details. Obviously here it will have company code, and instead of purchase org it will have a sales org. Then under ERP customer details, you will have company code and sales org. Okay. And then after having all the processing, you will have, let's say, BP number, and let's say same sort of a BP number, the same BP number, let's say you proceed with, and you have the customer number, which is like uh, something, such kind of number. Okay. So again, for customer also you have the BP number. So I repeat, in normal ECC, you may not have the, when you are creating the vendor number or when you are creating the customer number, you may not have the BP number. But in MDG scenario, it should have the vendor number along with BP, similarly the customer number along with BP. Okay. So this is how we have a kind of a relationship with the business partner. Now the another question is, it is very clear that whenever I'm creating vendor master or whenever I'm creating a customer master, I need to create along with a business partner. But when I'm creating just the business partner, whether in that case I need the vendor master or customer master, no, not necessary. If you are using just business partner, then you need not to create any vendor master or customer master. In that case, up to this information is okay. BP details like BP general data, address details, bank details, tax details, that is fine. Okay. So now, with having said this, in real-time project, it is hardly the case where you just create the business partner. In fact, you will not have this scenario at all. Rather, your project or your customer will go for vendor master and customer masters, because the moment you deal with vendor masters or customer master, automatically business partner will be part of it. Okay. So this is the basic concept of business partner, at least for those people who are not aware about this. Okay. So now in the BP data model, you have all the list of entity types, which is related to the, yes,
sorry
please tell
to
me.
interrupt. Just a question. Are you doing MDG with S4 HANA or with ECC?
Sorry, I did not understand your question.
Are we going to proceed with the training along with S4 HANA as a system?
Yes, yes, along with, let me share my, 1 minute, let me share the agenda. I hope you have seen the agenda. Wait a minute. I just unshare my screen. Okay, let me share my screen again. Okay. So I hope you can see my screen now. So if you go through this agenda, I hope you are there in the demo session, or if you are not there, just for your information, you can see in our agenda, it has been very clearly mentioned that we have S4 HANA understanding along with MDG. So that means in this discussion, we will have MDG on ECC along with MDG with S4 HANA. Okay. Not only that, just not only have the S4 HANA with MDG, also down the line you can see we have concept like MDG consolidation along with mass processing, which is a major part of S4 HANA. Okay. So yes, to answer your question, we are going to talk about MDG on ECC along with MDG S4 HANA.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I got it because I just saw that VP number plus vendor number, so it just struck me because while we are working in SAP environment, we will be asked such questions in the interview. Have you done on S4 HANA, and have you done hands-on with that? That's why I was just checking, cross-checking, confirming. That's it.
Yes. Whatever the concept I'm talking about, it is based on S4 HANA and ECC. So what the concept I talked about, it is all. It is the same concept what we have in S4 HANA MDG as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. So now coming to where we were. So in the data model BP, we have plenty number of entity types. Okay. Now, if I talk about few major entity types, which is mainly we deal with. Okay. So one entity type I just talked about few minutes back, which is BP header, which is having the details about the business partner ID and business partner account group. These are the two major information which we have, which is related to the BP. Then we have something called BP Central. BP Central is nothing but business partner central data. So in this central data, you have basically the contact details, the language, the land details, etc., etc. Then you have another details, which is address. So you have the address details. So we just talked about BP data, general data, address details as well. Then similarly, you have some bank details as well. So this is the bank details, business partner bank details. Okay. So where you have basically the bank ID, the IBAN number, the SWIFT number, all those details, account number, account name. Okay. And then followed by BP underscore vendor general data, VENGEN. Okay. And you can see this entity type, which is the type 4 entity type. So that means now you see this hierarchy. In this hierarchy, basically ERP vendor is following the BP details. Similarly, ERP customer following the BP details. Okay. So this is the type 4 entity type. And if you go to this attribute, you have the vendor general data information. Similarly, you have BP customer general data. So this is the customer general data information. Okay. So these are all the major entity types based on these details. Similarly, if I go by the relationships, so you can see there are different relationships. Again, if I start with BP header, so BP header is having leading relations with like uh, address, BP, BP central data, bank details, address details, then industry information, okay, role details, as I was telling, then tax information, okay, and then followed by like you can see business partner, customer general. Similarly, there will be business partner, vendor general data. So these are all relations. Okay. Similarly, if I talk about material master entity type. Now material master concept, if I talk about similar like BP material. Now in material, there are first thing which we have, that is material general data. Material general data. Under the general data, what kind of information we have? We have something like material number, then material type, then industry sector, then unit of measure, then material group. So these are all different data and so on, other details as well. Then you have the sales details, material sales details. Under the sales details, let's say you have sales org details, and inside the sales org you have plenty of sales org details. So I'm not going into that detail. Then you have the plant data, plant details. In plant details, the major data you have, that is the MRP details, let's say. So MRP controlling details, MRP account details, the other details about the MRP. In MRP details, like normally what kind of data we need to deal with, like price unit, then special procurement type, then uh, then let's say controlling lot size. So these are all different type of MRP data. Then you have account details, account details. So some account information you have, account info. Okay. So these are all different details related to the material. But in material, one good thing is you don't have any certain hierarchies like what we have for BP, vendor and customer. Okay. In material, it's very straightforward. Everything which we have, that is part of material itself, whether it is a material general data, whether it is a sales data or plant data or account details, etc. Okay. So now having said that, now if I come to the material part, again we have some plenty of entity types. So the major entity type I just talked about, that is material, which is the leading entity type. Here, if you see, first is the material group, MATKL, okay, material group, then industry sectors, then material type, then net weight, then cross plant material, then etc. So these are all nothing but product hierarchy. Okay, so these are all basically a base unit of measure, cross plant status. Okay, so these are all the basic details about the material. Without this detail, you cannot create any material at all. These are all very basic informations. Okay, then followed by some other details like, yeah, few more things I forgot to add. Let's say classification, then characteristics. Okay, so these are all details are also there. Okay, so if I talk about classification, so class assign is having the classification details. You can see the class assign is nothing but the type 4. As I was giving this example here, so classification will be the type 4, which depends on the type 1. Okay, then similarly the characteristics. So the characteristics comes under the entity type valuation, which is again type 4. Okay, so here we were saying characteristics also depends on the uh, material basic details, which is type 1. Okay, so under this valuation, we have the details about the characteristics, fields. Okay, so the characteristics value, then the deletion flag valid from, the comparison type, characteristics number of user defined data, etc. Okay, then you also have something called, as I was saying, sales data. Material sales details. I can go to MVKE cells, let's say. MVKE cells, which is the sales information. Okay, so these are all data related to the sales data. Then also you have something called Mara sales, which is again changeable via other entity type. They're all in relation with whom? Relation with the material entity type, which is type 1. So this is material sales data, and these are all different attributes for that. Okay. Then you have material purchase information, the purchase data, material purchasing data, and this is the attribute for that. Okay, so these are all standard attributes, standard entity types, and similarly the relationships. So if I see the relationship with material to the other entity type, you can see it is having relation with Mara purchase, in Mara sales, and these are all leading relationships. Okay, now just here it is, leading is very straightforward. So leading is like, here when I'm saying that the material classification also depends on material, characteristics also depends on material. If this is the case, then what kind of relationship we call? Because they all depends on the type 1. and this is nothing but the leading entity type, right? So in such case, the relationship, we call it as a leading relationship. Okay. So then MARC cells, plant sales information. Okay. Now the question is whether here classification, class assign, characteristics, these are all leading relationship. Now the question is, I may have thousands of, not thousand, I can tell you the exact number. So total 137 entity types I have. In my project, whether it is necessary to deal with all 137? Absolutely not. Hardly you need to deal with 7 entity types. Sometimes not even that. Okay. So based on your requirement, based on your project requirement, you need to deal with. Okay. But it is not necessary that you need all entity types, you need all attributes, because look, on an average, hardly any project you need to deal with regular basis 20 to 25 fields, or little lesser or higher than that, not beyond. Okay, so you can understand, if you deal with, let's say, 20 or 25 fields in the change request, MDG change request, then how many entity types you really require? 5, 6, 7, 10 max? Not even that, right? So this is one related to the material. Now coming to the finance. Now finance, you can see that we have basically two type of data model for finance. One is the OF, and another one is OG. So OF is nothing but the chart of accounts, and OG is nothing but chart of accounts and org unit. Okay. So now the thing is, earlier, when I'm talking about earlier means a few years back even, we were using OF data model, which is nothing but chart of accounts. But now we are not going to use OF anymore. We will use this OG data model, which is having chart of accounts and organization unit together. Okay. Now in this, basically, if I talk about again a similar kind of a picture with finance data, then basically as far as finance is concerned, we have some account details, then company details, then profit center, then profit center and profit center group. Similarly, we have cost center and cost center group, and many more other details. Okay, so these are all the major pillar of finance data. Okay, so now here you can see the account group, then followed by cost center, CCTR, cost center group, then followed by company, then company code, then currency is also there, then you have profit center group. Okay, so these are all different entity types which we have. Now finance will also work in similar way what we have discussed for material and business partner. But one thing which finance having, which is uh, quite unique, I can say, that is most of the entity types what you see here, they are the type 1 entity types, most of the cases. Okay, uh, because if you see comparatively for material and for business partner, for ERP vendor, ERP customer, they are like there will be one or two leading entity type and rest of the entity types will follow them. Okay, similar case for material. But finance case, what happens? They are quite independent. They definitely depends on each other some cases, but quite independent. So that is one side of it. So you can see there are lot many type 1 related entity types. Okay. So you can see this is cost center. Cost center is type 1. Similarly, cost center group is also type 1. Same way you can see other things. And in relationship, you can see uh, some entries which is like company is having a relation with account which is the referencing details. So company and company's relative account is nothing but the referencing relationship. Similarly, company code with company, that is also a referencing relations. Okay. So likewise, we have a different relations within the entity types. Okay. So this is the little details about the standard data model. Okay. Now also, just to check uh, at a glance the entire details, we can obviously go to the visualized data model, because otherwise what happens, we need to go to every entity type, we need to see all the details. Rather than that, what we can do, we can select the data model and we can quickly go to the visualized data model. Okay, and here you can see this is the material entity type, which is the basic data, and these are all details it is related to about that, and then followed by like valuation, which is characteristics detail, followed by which is sales details, followed by which is purchase, MARA sales, MARC sales. So these are all okay, and you can expand them and you can identify the attribute. So this is entity which is in a folder, and these are all attributes. Okay, so this is the way you can easily identify your data. Let's say I want to see material type, and here we have. So this material type is part of material entity type. Okay, so this way you can see your record at a glance. Similarly, the one which we have created, we also can see this record. So here we can see, so carrier ID is the leading entity type, where we have basically the carrier ID itself is entity type and also reflecting as well as an attribute. Then we have the relationship entry, which is currency, and description and URL. And that is what we had an ambition to create: carrier ID, currency, airline, and description. These are all. Okay. Now one more information here. As I was saying, that post we activate the data model, we need to, the sequential step is we need to go to SE38. We need to go to SE38 which is executable ABAP program editor, and there we just call USMD adjust staging this particular program and execute, and that will basically help in the synchronization process. Now in some of the document you can also identify this icon. So this icon is also adjust staging area of link change request, so which is nothing but the adjust staging area concept. But I would strongly recommend not to use this icon. Why? Because we have seen that, and this is an observation from the different project point of view, that after the activation of the data model, if you just select and try to adjust the staging table from here, sometimes it does not work as expected. I mean, does not synchronize as expected. So rather using this option, we would say go to SE38 and then activate that. Okay, so that will be the more better way to deal with it. And by the way, data model is something which you are not going to change every day. Once when you are doing the implementation, you will change it. But thereafter, it will not change every day, because remember, if you change the data model, your entire framework will change completely. So you have to be very cautious when you are changing the data model. Okay. Yes. So this is little detail about the, we will definitely come back. Leading we just talked about, however we will see the demonstration. Qualifying and foreign key we will see in the another example. Okay, cardinality we talked about. Then we have active and staging area. Okay, so what is the active area and staging area? So the active area is, it holds the data that is ready to be used by the application. And what is staging area? Staging area is holds the data that is not yet approved, currently part of the change request. Now, as I was talking about, let's say I have a process, requester, verifier, approval. Okay. Now requester will create or update the change request, MDG CR, and then once it does, it will the data will go to the staging table. Staging table or staging area, both are same, which is nothing but this is the place. So as I was showing, let's say YB, sorry, I'm using different program. USMD data model. This is the one. Okay. At this moment, I don't have any entry, as I just mentioned, because we have just started this. So down the line, when we will have process model, when we will have UI in place, thereafter we will start creating the entries, and then you can see the staging table will have those entries. Okay, just 1 minute. Okay. Now, so create or update MDG CR, and once requester. So who is the requester basically? Requesters are nothing but the end users. End users can be your IT, from the customer side, IT personals, or your managers, or your store managers, mill managers, etc. Okay. Then once they create or update the MDG CR, it goes for the verification. So here in the verification, it can be approve or reject based on your data. And yes, it will again, the data will be in the staging table. Okay. Because why it is in the staging table? It is still in the process. Still your data is not activated. Okay. And then it will go to the approver. So approver also will have approve or reject. Still it will have the staging table. Okay. Now let's say in my process, this is the final level of approval. Once the approver will give the final level of approval, what is going to happen? Your data is going to activate. And during the activation, your data will move to the active area. Okay, active area. So active area for the time being, just remember different database table like MARA table, MVKE table, LFA1 table, KNA1 table, whatever the master data you have. It may have material related master data, so it will go to MARA table, MVKE, MARC, etc. If it is vendor master, then okay, just for those who are not aware about the tables. So let's say for vendor, it is LFA1 table, which is nothing but vendor master general data. Okay. Then LFB1, which is vendor company code, the vendor company code details. Then LF1 table, which is vendor purchase org details. Okay. So this is the three major table. Similarly, if I talk about customer, it's KNA1 table. Same way, customer general data. Then KNB1, customer company code. Then KNM1. Or I just need to check the sales data table. Okay. Customer sales table. Sales. Okay. So this is the table. Similarly for material, so we have MARA, which is material general data. Similarly, we have MARC, material plant. Then also we have MVKE, we have MARD. These are all tables. Okay. Similarly, we have some finance table. I will share some finance table as well. I think down the line in the slides we have those details as well. Okay. So this is the concept of staging and active area. So that means if your data is in staging table, I can easily say that your data is under the processing and it is not an active record. But whenever your data is in active area, I can say your data is in active, it is an active record and it is in the, let's say, database. So That's what it is saying. Let me repeat one more time. So active area holds data that is ready to be used by the application. Staging area holds the data that is not yet approved, currently part of the change request. Okay. Now, for optimized integration and flexibility, MDG allows two modes for the active area. One is the reuse active area. Okay, so there are basically two type of modes. One is the reuse mode and the flex mode. Okay, so what it says, if I go by this statement, the statement says in the existing structure that is in the database table of the application are used. For an example, MDG for material makes use of Mara table in ECC. Reuse class needed used for MDG supplier, customer, material can be used for the custom of the starting. Let me help you to understand. So there are two concepts, reuse mode and flex mode. So it is saying when you are saying that the reuse mode and flex mode. So basically reuse mode is, so we have, let's say for an example, data model, where ultimately for data model, the data is going to Mara table, MARC table, MBK table, etc. Okay, let's concentrate on Mara table, which is material general master data goes. So it says if you have certain requirement where you are extending your data model and with that extension you also need to extend your respective database table. That means your extended custom records will also go to your respective database table, whether it is Mara table or MVKE, MARC, doesn't matter, but the respective database table as well. If that is the case, then it is, we call it as a reuse mode. Now you can say obviously, if I extend my data, it will also extend to the respective database table. Then always it has to be reuse mode. No, it is not like that. It is not like that if you're, based on your requirement, if you are extending your data model with some custom record, that you also need to extend in the database table. No, because there are some cases where you need some custom field in your MDG framework, but ultimately that data you don't need your database table. Okay, just you need it for a certain processing purpose in MDG, but ultimately you don't need that in Mara table or other material related table or customer related table or vendor related table, whatever. So if both of the places you are adding, that means you are extending the data model as well as you are extending the master data table. Then only we can say it is a reuse mode. But flex mode is your hello, you can hear me, right?
You cut off for a while.
Yes, I got a call, so that's all. Yeah. So yeah. So I was talking about the flex mode. So flex mode is you are extending your data model, but not extending the master data table. Not extending the master data table. That is the flex mode. That means though you are using some custom fields in your MDG data model for certain reason, for certain validations, for certain derivations, but ultimately you don't need to include those custom fields in your master data table. Okay, so if that is the case, then it will be part of the flex mode. Okay, now go back again and what it says regarding the flex mode. Generated active area flex mode. Tables as defined in MDG data model are used to store active data. Used for MDG finance has to be used for the custom object in EPA 6. So basically now if I say in which of those cases we will be using reuse mode and which of those cases we will be using the flex mode. So I can say for data model, for BP data model, for custom data model, we will be using the reuse mode. Okay. Flex mode is something which we use normally for the finance data model. Okay. And obviously you can use some similarly your custom data model as well. Okay. It is all depends on your requirement. But now the question is why finance? Why not other first of all, you can also use for BP as well. Again, it depends. It all depends on your requirement. Okay, so this is no thumb rule. It all depends on your requirement. But why finance? Because finance we hardly make any reuse mode. Mainly whatever we will do the flex mode. Now let me help you to give some real-time example which will clear your concept. Now let's say every year we can hear that every year we are getting some financial relaxes from the government, right? So let's say initially it was 3 lakhs, then 3.5, and now probably it's 5 lakhs, right? Based on the income group. So this relaxation what we get, that is a kind of a benefit which provided by the government to its citizen. Okay, so when these relaxations they are giving, there is a basically every year if it is changing or updating, basically one of the parameter is getting updated, which is the minimum bar, which income bar, right? So ultimately if you see your calculation and finally when you see your ITR sheet, in the final table, whether any additional entry will be maintained for that? No. Final table entry will have what is your income, what is your profit, what is your tax. This is the simple details you will have. Then for calculation purpose, you will have certain parameter which will every year change, right, based on the government announces. So that is nothing but your flex data. So flex data can be changed within your MDG framework, but ultimately this data is not going to any certain table. It is just used for a certain calculation, for certain validations, but ultimately that is not going to any certain table. So that's the reason mostly we can see for finance case the flex mode we have. But it does not mean that in MM or in BP you are not at all using flex mode, yes, there will be so many occasions where you will be required to maintain the flex mode or reuse mode. Okay. Now here one particular point I would like to understand how you will come to know that which field, if you have some custom field, let's say you have 10 custom fields, how you will know being an IT developer that which will be your reuse mode or flex mode. So the answer is we need to clarify with our customer, with our client during our project discussion. Now let's say if your customer having some MDG consultant, then it's fine. But if they don't have, if you just explain them or if you just ask them that look, I'm going to define the data in the data model. So can you please tell me as you have 10 custom fields, how many custom fields I want to maintain as a reuse mode and flex mode? Then they will not able to answer you because they are not aware about this concept of reuse mode and flex mode. All you need to do, you need to make them understand in such a way, or you have to present in a functional way, like let's say you have 10 custom fields. How many fields in among those 10 custom fields you need to be part of a data model as well as part of the table? Then they will come to know, okay, so this data, the field I want in data model and in MDG framework. Even they don't know what is data model. They will say in MDG and also in the table. And there will be some more also which will be in MDG, but I don't need to see in the table. So this way you have to deal with your customer. Okay. So there will be certain terms which your customer may not be aware about. Okay. So this is the flex mode and reuse mode. So this picture is, now you can little relate to this picture. So you create change request, whether it is a new or update. So your data, the moment you submit, it goes to the staging table and then it goes for approval, etc., etc., whatever the steps you have. Then after the activation only, your data will go to the active area. Okay. And everything which is happening flex mode, because your data is within the MDG application, so your data will be within MDG application foundation. It is not going to the respective database table. Where in reuse mode, you create a change request, whether it is a new or change data, your data will go to the staging table and within that is within the MDG application, and after activation it will go to the active area, which is nothing but your ECC application suite, which is your basically the tables, the database tables. Okay. So that's the two different picture of reuse mode and flex mode. Okay. Okay. So I will stop here. Okay, I think again there was some glitch in the connection. I hope you can hear me. Okay. So let me repeat this flex mode and reuse mode in this pictorial diagram. So the flex mode and reuse mode. So in the flex mode, the change request, you can see the change request, whether it is a new or updated change request. 1 second. Which screen you are right now seeing? Can you please confirm?
We see the flex mode and reuse mode on the diagram.
Okay, fine, yeah. So the change request new or change data, whether you are creating new or the updated change request. So ultimately, after the submission, your data will come to the staging table, which is the inactive record basically. And then all the approvals and everything will go. And then once active, the activation take place, your data will go to the active area. But as you are using the flex mode, that means your data will be within the MDG framework. So even though after the activation, it will be part of your MDG application foundation. Now coming to the reuse mode, what is happening, that is the change request, whether it is a new or the updated information, the data will go to the staging table after submitting the change request, and it will be obviously part of MDG application foundation. But after the activation, it will go to the active area, which is nothing but your ECC application suite. That is nothing but the database table. So the different database table. Okay. So this is how we define the flex mode and the reuse mode.
Aditya, just a quick question over here. Like we saw, like for each data model, there was this check table and the text table and all, and then there will be corresponding, active area tables, right? So in the flex mode, even though there is an active area, is it like another set of tables? Like if you take an example of.
No. Yes, I understand your question. So now, let me go to the data model for an instance. Here, now let's say under the material entity type, we have, let's say, Z field, okay, or Z test. For an example, ZZ test, which is a custom field part of data model. And also I need to check whether this field is also part of Mara table or not. So here, ZZ test. Now I can see ZZ test. So let's say Z field 1. Let's see. Z field 1. Okay. So Z field 1 is a certain field which is part of the data model, and also it is part of the Mara table. Okay. Now, in that case, how this field look like in the staging table? So this will be a check table. This is the Z field 1. See, so to answer your question, there will be no additional table created. It's not required to create any additional table. Rather, this entry will be part of the existing check table, what we have for that respective entity type. Okay, so if you create any reuse mode entry, it does not mean that it will create another staging table for that. Rather, it will incorporate that data within the existing table. Okay, if that answer your question.
And in the opposite case, when it is flex mode, it will just create a separate table for this ZZ field one.
It will, yes. So basically what will happen if it is the flex mode, you can see, I can see one field which has been created as a flex. It will be also part of that particular staging table. Whether it is flex or reuse, it will be part of staging. But in active table, it will be only the reuse mode field, not the flex field.
Got it. The fields which are in reuse will also be there in the active area table, but the flex fields won't be there. It will just be in the staging area table.
Right. In staging, it will have flex and reuse both. Okay.
And where did you specify that one, Aditya? Like when you define the attribute, is there a setting there?
Yes, there is a set of configuration. I will come to that. So we just today talked about the description or the basic understanding about reuse mode and flex mode. But there is a set of configurations which needs to be done for the reuse mode and flex mode. I'm coming to that. So then, okay, our next is add custom attribute in the data model, add custom entity types in the data model. So in these two examples, what we will see? We will see basically the two major topics. First major topic is regarding this reuse mode and flex mode. Because this reuse mode and flex mode, when it will come into the picture, the moment you enhance your data model, okay, not when you are dealing with the standard data model. So basically, this particular slide is representing our third type of data model, which is enhancement of the standard data model, right? So in this case, we will be enhancing our data model with custom attribute and the custom entity types. And while doing that, first we will see the demonstration for leading, qualifying and foreign key, this one, and then we will see the example of how to configure the reuse mode and how to configure the flex mode and the relative details. So this will basically cover the custom attribute in the data model and add custom entity types in the data model, which followed by the general model and which followed by the CVI, customer vendor integration. Okay. Anyway, so this will be part of your enhancement topic. Okay, so this will be part of your enhancement of the standard data model. So which we will start from the next session. Fine. So this is our discussion for today. Since last week, whatever the discussions we had, the Excel sheet I have already shared with coordinator. Today, end of the session, I will also share this Excel and the relative documents. Whatever we discussed today, particularly this Excel and the relative documents are already in the drive. So you can access them and you can go through them. Okay. So any questions so far, whatever we discussed? So basically, if I go by the, now let me go by the agenda. So today we talked about develop custom under the data model. So today we basically started this data model. So under the data model, we talked about develop custom data model and the standard data model. These two details and also the other details, because you have seen while explaining the custom and the standard, we come across a lot of basic understanding, right? And from next session, we will continue with the enhancement. So in real-time project, basically we need to deal with this one. But today, whatever we discussed, without that understanding, you cannot move to this particular details, right? So this is the, so basically today we talked about custom data model and standard data model.